Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we find ourselves discussing Ed Skrein and Hellboy for the third time. We've never talked about Ed Skrein so much before. Nobody has. And the conversation wasn't going so well, but I think he might have turned it around. I think he turned the public conversation around. And what I find so fascinating is that I wonder if he might have hurt himself, behind the scenes in Hollywood. I think there's some indication of that. It's fascinating. All right, so anyway, the first time we talked about Ed Skrein and Hellboy, he'd been cast in the role of Major Ben Daimio, a member of the division for which Hellboy works, who turns into a panther when he's angry or in pain. And when I reported that news, many of you said in the comments, even then, I'm surprised, Grace, that you didn't bring up the fact that this character has been whitewashed. He's Japanese American in the comics. And some people, when Ed Skrein, because the third, fast forward, he dropped out of the role yesterday. We're getting there. But some people said, because he said he didn't know either that the role was supposed to be Japanese American when he was cast. And some people said, you should have done your research, Ed. But obviously, Ed Skrein doesn't read Hellboy comics. A lot of people don't, to be perfectly honest with you. And even when I looked at an illustration of the character, it didn't jump out at me that he was Japanese American. And so Ed Skrein, when they come to Ed Skrein, who, to be fair, doesn't work very much, right? I mean, he hasn't done very much since Deadpool. And they say, do you want to be in this hot new Hellboy reboot with David Harbour and Mila Jovovich and Ian McShane and Neil Marshall from Game of Thrones is directing? He says, hell yes, I do. He's not like, hold on, let me go read the comic and do some research about it, right? He's like, yes, where do I sign? I want to do it. He probably was, I don't know if he had to audition or not, but he was probably so happy. And also, I have to say, if he even did the most, precursory look at it, I don't think it would have occurred to him that it was whitewashing. And clearly in the script, it didn't say Japanese American, or Ed Skrein would have also been like, hold on a minute, I have a question. So they never intended to cast someone of Japanese descent in the role, which, again, is on the production, and we're going to get there. So the second time we talked about it, this had reared its ugly head in the trades, because as we discussed, it was a slow news period, and they were like, another whitewashing controversy. That's always good for clicks, and so everybody covered it. And Ed Skrein was like, holy crap, I do not want to join that group of actors. Sometimes they survive it, sometimes they don't. But it haunts all of them. And Ed Skrein, I don't think he's big enough he's a big enough talent and has enough of a following. He's not like Tilda Swinton, where you're like, not cool, Tilda, but Tilda Swinton's a genius and an artist, so we're not going to get rid of Tilda Swinton. But I think Ed Skrein would be like, I don't think Ed Skrein at first glance looks like the nicest guy, so he's like, I don't need to get hit with stealing roles from other actors, right? I mean, that's not the kind of reputation I want to get. And, again, the internet never forgets. I think Emma Stone is still haunted by her role in Aloha, where Emma Stone was supposed to be, of Hawaiian, Asian descent, which was absolutely ridiculous. That'll never go away. So yesterday, and that's why we're discussing it for a third time, Ed Skrein says, you know what? I did some soul searching. I don't think it's right for me to take a role from an Asian actor. And this isn't going to change unless I do something about it. So I've told the producers that I'm walking away from the project. And he shared this decision on social media with a very nice post. And I have to say, since yesterday, he's gained 20,000 new followers and he trended online. Fabulous! And it's the lead headline again in all the trades because it's another slow news cycle. And I would hope that the takeaway from producers and casting agents in town would be, what a swell guy. Is there a room for him in our movie? I suspect, though, they might have been like, what a troublemaker. He couldn't have just taken the role and let it die down like everyone else did. I'm a little nervous about that because if you look at the comments that were made by the producers and the studio of Hellboy and the decisions that they made with this, basically they let Ed walk away. They were like, okay, happy trails, Ed. That's really swell of you. Is quite surprising and telling. Now, when I discussed the whitewashing controversy, the second time we discussed this, I said Ed Skrein should not play that role, but they should give him another role in Hellboy and just go, recast that role. That's what they should do. So only half of what I said should be done happened because only Ed Skrein stepped up to the plate. And I find it shocking that the producers, and they said, we really respect Ed. He came to us and he said, I just can't play this role. I'm shocked the producers didn't come to Ed and said, this is going to kill our movie. I don't think you can play this role, right? Apparently they were okay with it continuing. And even to the point that they wouldn't even lie about it once he did make the decision. Why wouldn't they say, yeah, we all came to this conclusion, right? Or when Ed came to us and said, I don't think I can do this, we knew it was the right call, and we're so glad that he made it and we back him, right? They were like, oh, we wish him good luck. He said he couldn't do it, so we're going to recast and we'll do it that's more in correlation with the source material, as in an Asian actor, right? So that was shocking to me. And then, not only did they not put him in another role in Hellboy, but they didn't even find another project for him. Wouldn't it have been nice if Millennium and Lionsgate, who are, Millennium is the production company, Lionsgate is the distributor, they have to have other films that are in development or that they're actively making. Wouldn't it have been nice for them to say, we're so glad to be in business with someone like Ed Skrein, and we're so excited to still be able to work with him either in Hellboy or this other project. But they didn't do that. Ed Skrein has parted ways with not only this movie, but everyone involved in it. That's amazing. So I think that really underlines how important and difficult a decision this was, and that he's not out of the woods yet. Now, you know who really owes Ed Skrein? Whatever actor lands this role. And I hope that they have the strength of character to keep Skrein in the loop and I'm sure that some people will tell that actor, you don't want Ed Skrein to overshadow you, do you? But I think someone who is giving him good advice, whoever gets, the Asian actor who gets the role, would be, you don't want to seem ungrateful, do you? Because you literally wouldn't have this role if Ed Skrein hadn't dropped out. So Ed Skrein's not going to do like the junket. He's not going to be in the movie with this other actor. But I would say that this actor should take Ed Skrein to the red carpet, because I don't think that the producers are going to invite him, I suspect, and have Ed Skrein be his date to the premiere and walk the carpet with him, because it's going to benefit both of them. Who wouldn't want that interview on the red carpet? It would be the top interview to get on the red carpet, to have those two actors together. And also, Ed Skrein now he went from 30,000 followers on Twitter to 50,000. He has a voice. I'll be curious to see how he uses it. I think maybe to some degree the film also would be like, don't bring Ed Skrein to the red carpet. I hope that the actor who gets the role says, come on, I can't, just like Ed Skrein, I gotta do what's right. So it's very interesting, and it goes to show you how difficult it is in Hollywood, how political it is, and that Hollywood, behind the scenes, still has not embraced the need to cast roles correctly. And some people said, well, why do people not get upset when they why do people not get upset when they take a white role and give it to a person of a different ethnicity? But how would you feel? Like, why, if we took it and gave a role of another ethnicity to a white actor, right? It's just a lack of roles, I think, is really the issue, and that they're adapting material that was written at a time when there wasn't as much diversity. So that's kind of the situation. And also, bottom line, it's the reality of the audience. You need to get multiple demographics into theaters these days. As I said, the Asian box office will greatly benefit Hellboy, so it's odd that they weren't trying to capitalize that in the first place. And that's really, Hollywood is a business, and again, they make decisions sometimes for creative reasons, but also sometimes for business reasons. Although this baffles me, because it's been made very clear that whitewashing is a bad business decision. All right, so anyway, that's the first story of the day, and I'd be very curious to what you think of it. And what do you think of that angle from behind the scenes, which I don't think is really being discussed? All right, so anyway, second story of the day. Whew, this is another headache for Hollywood, but I think, again, one that's needs to happen. And that's that the Walking Dead stuntman who was killed on set doing a stunt, John Berniker, his mother, Susan Berniker, has hired the same attorney who represented Sarah Jones's family in her wrongful death situation on the Midnight Rider set. Very different situation, though. Midnight Rider was like the most indie of indies, and she, of course, was struck by a train and killed when they did not have a permit to shoot there. But Walking Dead is a huge, mainstream phenomenon, right? It's the flagship show for AMC right now. But anyway, this guy, Jeffrey R. Harris, still managed to get $11.2 million for Sarah Jones's family in a civil lawsuit, largely against the railroad company, which apparently some earlier trains had spotted them filming and had not called it in. So he already has a huge win in his column, and now he's going to represent, he's Atlanta-based, and I believe all this stuff took place around that area. There's a lot of production in Atlanta, maybe not anymore. They're like, there's an attorney just sitting there, as there should. And that's the real issue. Money is what talks in Hollywood, right? It's really, the driving force. And so if a lawyer develops an expertise for representing people who are, wrongful death lawsuits in Hollywood, which, by the way, really shouldn't be coming up. Nobody should die making a movie. But now that there's someone who's going to be an expert and who will be actively working against Hollywood, a place for these families to go, it's going to make Hollywood be more careful. I think it's sad that that's what it takes to make Hollywood be more careful, but Jeffrey R. Harris, it'll be interesting to see if he's vilified. Sometimes that happens to these kinds of attorneys, I hope it happened to Gloria Allred, although I think Gloria Allred sometimes isn't always on the up and up either. I think sometimes she takes some really tabloidy, salacious cases and in her efforts to be a feminist attorney, right? But, Jeff, we'll see what the publicity tactic is used, if there's one used against Jeffrey R. Harris. But anyway, so he's going to represent the Berniker, John Berniker's mother, Susan, and obviously, because she's hired him, they're going to sue The Walking Dead. Now, it also makes you wonder, is the other shoe going to drop with Deadpool 2? That story has kind of gone away. It lingered for longer than I think it normally would have because of, again, the slow news cycle. They've been accused of gross negligence on that set. Really shocking things. But still, I wouldn't be surprised because there's very deep pockets involved there and a lot at stake with, of course, the sequel to Deadpool that Fox, quietly took care of that with a huge payout, which I think is deserved in this case. I think Disney did the same thing as I've discussed before with you when that alligator killed that child recently on the Disney World property. I think you'll notice that went away and there was never a lawsuit. If there isn't a lawsuit, it was settled out of court for a significant amount of money. But The Walking Dead is an interesting situation because they have lawsuit after lawsuit over there. I don't know what's going on with those producers, but for some reason they don't pay anyone, it seems. They're not, like, for instance, the producers, some producers who were previously associated, they have horrible turnover there too. Although obviously John Berniker's death is the worst thing to happen to The Walking Dead. But anyway, some producers feel they haven't been paid their fair share of the profits on the show. So that's a lawsuit that the show was just hit with. And this one apparently is coming down the pipeline. And one has to wonder how many lawsuits can again, the key AMC show, the flagship AMC show, withstand before it just crumbles. And I have to say, for fans of the show, how do you feel that apparently the people who run Walking Dead are so horrible that everyone on the face of the earth sues them and they're so unhappy and they can't keep anyone working there? It's crazy, but the show is wildly successful. So but I don't know if there's a big enough payout, it could break both The Walking Dead and AMC for that stuntman's death. It could be devastating. But if the negligence is as bad as being said, some people could feel it's deservedly so. Very interesting situation. I don't know why AMC wouldn't just do a huge payout to settle this. But they, again, won't pay anyone. All right, so that's the second story of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. The third story of the day is about Andrew Garfield, who it seems they're very aggressively building a case for him to win Best Actor this year at the Oscars for his film Breathe. He plays a quadriplegic who helped invent many of the things that have helped the disabled to be able to go out and live as normal a life as possible. And for instance, as we've discussed before, some of those things were used to help Christopher Reeve. So I think it's going to strike a nerve with Hollywood, who of course had a front row seat to what happened to Christopher Reeve, many of them, particularly, I'm sure, Academy voters. So anyway, so Breathe, you wouldn't think it would be a front runner. It's Andy Serkis, he's directing, it's not like a huge film. But they've started the campaign, they started early, and it was a huge headline. Again, they took advantage of the slow news cycle to point out that Andrew Garfield is getting the Golden Eye Award at the Zurich Film Festival this year, where he will present his new movie Breathe as part of that whole festival and presentation. Now, what's interesting to me is that the Golden Eye Award is a lifetime achievement honor, and Andrew Garfield seems like he's got a lot of life left to be receiving such an award. It usually goes to more senior members of the industry. But anyway, they pointed out that his films so far are quite impressive: Hacksaw Ridge, Silence, and now Breathe. And I have to say, that is a very good lineup of films. I think that just also shows that you have to plant the seeds and lay the groundwork, all those metaphors, for getting an Oscar. You can't just be like, I made an amazing movie, give me an Oscar. You have to be like, oh, look, I'm getting in line. Look how good this performance is. Okay, now you've nominated me. I'm getting a reputation as a talented actor. And is it my turn now for an Oscar? I mean, it's pretty early, but I don't know anybody else who I think is like a front runner yet. I think the best actor Oscar is still open. And, I think Andrew Garfield and the team behind Breathe and his management are trying to maybe make him a front runner. And I would be very excited about that. I think he's a very good actor, and I think he might indeed be ready to win the best actor Oscar. And his next film coming up is actually Under the Silver Lake, by the It Follows director David Robert Mitchell for A24. Took him a heck of a long time to follow up to that movie, but it's coming along the line, and he certainly has a fabulous star. Although I will say that A24 does a horrible job campaigning not only for box office, with moviegoers, but for awards season. They certainly have made a reputation for themselves, and people pay attention to what A24 releases, but by no means are they like a Fox Searchlight, who are pretty darn good at releasing films, except Nate Parker gets in the way, unfortunately. But I think what's really interesting about this is that Andrew Garfield was able to rebound from the Spider-Man debacle, the Amazing Spider-Man debacle, where he was so infamously recast and cut down in his prime portraying the character. I think that also helped him, and that everyone was like, these movies aren't great, but Andrew Garfield's good. And even when they cast Tom Holland, a number of fans were like, couldn't you have kept Andrew Garfield? So I'm so happy, and I think that should, serve as, a nice example that if a big blockbuster, because, they make more blockbusters these days, and I can understand, what if I'm rejected? What if the audience doesn't like the movie? Is that going to kill my career? I think, representation can point to Andrew Garfield and say, not necessarily, give it your all, make sure you do a nice job, and even if the film itself doesn't work out, you might make some fans along the way and be able to build something. So good for Andrew Garfield, and, right now, I'd be happy to see him, I have to see Breathe, but it looks very good, and I'd be happy to see him take home the Best Actor Oscar. I think his body of work, which is usually what you're being rewarded for, is already Oscar caliber quality. All right, so the viewer question of the day comes from Myruna Elena Barty. And this is a good one. So Myruna says, "Hi Grace, I have a viewer question. Regarding the upcoming Murder on the Orient Express, for which you covered the trailer, that's what the question is regarding. I travel a lot, and since I'm a massive Agatha Christie fan, awesome, I used to read her novels while flying. Last year in the airport, I bought the new Sophie Hannah Poirot novel, which is approved by Agatha's family, caught my eye, and I bought it and I read it." So what she's talking about here is that the Poirot brand, is continuing with a different author, because obviously Agatha Christie has passed away. She can't write new stories. But the Agatha family, which oversees her estate, has approved Sophie Hannah to write new Poirot mysteries, which Myruna purchased and bought it. So Myruna says, "It wasn't a bad read and it is a bestseller." That's not a huge recommendation there, Myruna, but let's continue. "I was wondering from a business perspective, is it a better idea to remake a classic like Kenneth Branagh and his team have decided to do and face the comparison with the earlier portrayals of the same characters, or create new material within a familiar franchise, for example, filming The Closed Casket instead? Actually, clearly Sophie Hannah, this new writer, is a Shakespeare fan herself, so I believe Ken would have enjoyed that. I like how you think, Myruna. You'd be a good in a pitch room. I'm also wondering if this would apply to comics. Is it better to use the existing storylines from the comics for the movies, or should they try to create a totally original storyline that is exclusive or starts in the movies? I'd always like to see that. Thank you so much for all the content you make. I really missed morning movie news while you were away." Oh, I'm sorry today's was late. You're so nice, Myruna. All right, so fabulous question. Really, really good question. The thing is that Hollywood is, as we've discussed many times, Hollywood is very risk averse. So this is a great way for me to explain that and give you an actual example, right? So Hollywood sells things based on the reputation of other things. That's why they love to adapt stuff. They're like, I didn't come up with this story. This book did. This TV show did. And all these other people already like it. So you should maybe too. And also I have a built-in fan base when the movie comes out. I don't have to win over a whole new fan base. You're already excited about it, some of you, because you liked the source material, the original. So you're going to come and see my movie. Although these days, the original fan base can be a real problem for the adaptation. Just ask the producers of Death Note, who caused quite a headache for that adaptation over the weekend. So anyway, Hollywood says, well, you know what? This is what I want to sell. I want to sell the name Agatha Christie. Everyone's heard of Agatha Christie. I want to sell Murder on the Orient Express. Even if you aren't familiar with the story, you've heard the title somewhere, right? The first adaptation, the film made in the 1970s, it did nicely at the box office. It wasn't like a blockbuster, but it did very well. It had 6 Oscar nominations, 1 win for Best Supporting Actress for Ingrid Bergman. So that's what they're doing. They're like, oh, the Murder on the Orient. This is basically Hollywood wants you to go, oh yeah, I've heard of Agatha Christie. I've heard of Murder on the Orient Express. I'm not familiar with it though. I've only heard about it. So you know what? I should go see it, right? It's one of those stories you should see. It's a classic, right? So that's what they're doing. Now, if they were to take the Sophie Hannah person, they'd be like, that's a much harder sell. People are like, I don't know who Sophie Hannah is. I've never heard of this title of this mystery. I mean, I've heard of Poirot, but I've never heard of The Closed Casket. I'm glad it's a bestseller, and so maybe if the Murder on the Orient Express succeeds, then they can say for the sequel, oh, okay, well, I think honestly, to be honest with you, they just worked their way through all the famous Agatha Christie Poirot novels first because they're an easier sell. But then if they wanted to be really ambitious, they could say, well, let's take one of these newer stories and adapt it, and then we could. But we've already sold people on the first film, so it's not as they can take a little bit more of a risk. But I have to also tell you that Hollywood also, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and everybody wants to put their fingerprints on something. So if Murder on the Orient Express were to succeed, I wouldn't be shocked if, let's say, Kenneth Branagh, who seems to be a bit of an egomaniac because he cast himself as Poirot. Like, nobody was like, when's Kenneth Branagh coming back to the big screen, right? I think he should have taken a smaller supporting role and just really knocked it out of the park and have everyone be like, I didn't realize I missed Kenneth Branagh, but I do. I did. I'm so glad that he's back. Instead, you're like, I think you could have cast a lot of other people as Poirot and it would have been a better idea. But anyway, instead I feel like the suspects are propping up Kenneth Branagh in the starring role, right? It's weird. I think I wouldn't have allowed him to do it if I were Fox. We'll see. But we'll see how the film turns out. But because he's such an egomaniac, I wouldn't be surprised if Murder on the Orient Express succeeds. He goes, you know what? I think I have an original Poirot mystery inside of me. So I'm going to write an original story, an original mystery, and that will be the new Poirot mystery. And no one will have read it, even as a book on an airplane written by this Sophie Hannah person. That's what I think would happen if they didn't do it. Proper Agatha Christie Poirot situation. Or they get some hot screenwriter, and they'd be like, oh, everybody loves this screenwriter. He's written don't you want to see his version of a Poirot mystery? That's what Hollywood would do. I feel bad for Sophie Hannah. She should get out there. And also, even you, Maruna, said it was pretty good. I feel like if she had a little bit more traction, if the only way it would work for Sophie Hannah is if people were like, my God, Sophie Hannah's novels are so good. They're as good, if not better, than what Agatha Christie did. She's a genius. If she had that kind of buzz, then maybe they would adapt her Agatha Christie novel. But so far, I think she's just kind of a placeholder. A very good one, keeping it going. You were satisfied, but not so much to the point where you're like, we should adapt this next. So that's how it works. But great question. I personally would like original stories. But, again, Hollywood is really, they like to be able to say, based on the famous comic book crossover event, even though we changed 90% of it. I'm talking about Civil War. All right, so anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below today's top 3 stories, Maruna's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.